Cops of Reddit, what was the funniest thing you've seen someone do because they noticed you? My nephew when he was like 7 used to always drop to his shoes and quickly tie them whenever he saw me. Apparently my sister-in-law told him that it's illegal to have your shoes untied. One time at night I saw some teens at a scenic overlook smoking a joint. I quietly walked up behind them and was literally standing 3 feet above them. I waited until one of them took a big drag and then turned on my flashlight. Kid just died inside as he looked at me and stated "oh shit" while the smoke came out. It was hilarious to me. Laughed even harder while I took him to jail. Just kidding, I'll let them go. My dad and I both work for the same PD. This is his story, not mine. The shift before he had a guy detained for misdemeanor warrants or something. Some junkie comes walking down the road, sees the flashing lights and a cop next to her open back door. He empties his pockets, dumping a pipe, needles, and 5 grams of meth on the hood of his patrol car. He then spreads his legs and puts his hands on the car. My dad was shocked, let the other guy in the back go and took in the guy who just handed over his meth. Apparently not sleeping for 3 days makes you paranoid. Maybe too late, but one day I was headed to my station at the end of shift, meaning I stare straight ahead and avoid getting any paperwork to make me stay late. I happened to be behind the same car for maybe 2 miles on the same road. We're sitting at a red light and out of nowhere this dude runs it. Everyone at the intersection looks at me, so of course I stop the dude. Make contact and he can barely hand me his license. He's shaking so bad from being nervous. Ask why he's so scared and he says he saw me behind him and he's on diversion for running a red light. Also ends up having weed in the car. This question reminds me of an experience I had as a kid. My friend, who was black, probably plays a role into how things panned out, was interested in becoming a DJ, so he invested a lot of money into amps, turntables, subwoofers, etc. He used the same equipment in his car as he did with his turntables, and just powered them off a 12 volt power supply when using them outside his car. Well, we're sitting in his backyard, and he's messing around with the turntables, when a cop car just pulls up all slow. The backyard was separated from the alley by just a chain link fence. The cop in a suspicious voice says, "Hey, do you have a receipt for all that equipment?" And without missing a beat my friend claps back with, "Do you have a receipt for those shoes you're wearing?" And the cop just kind of nods as if to say fair enough and gets back in the car and leaves. Where I work it is illegal to walk around in public with open liquor. At the time I was on patrol and driving a Crown Vic. As I was going down the street a guy must have thought I was a taxi cab and he tried hailing me with an open can of beer. Once he realized I was a police officer he looked just like Ralphie from A Christmas Story. Oofu ujgly. I was laughing so hard I didn't have the heart to give him a ticket. I was at a traffic light, waiting to cross, and I saw this lady with her young son across the street. The kid was running around yelling and generally not listening to his mum. As I crossed the street I heard the mother say, "If you don't behave I'll ask the police, uncle." Uncle? Lady, I'm like 23, to catch you. Look, he's here already. Kid stops dead in his tracks, looks at me, wordlessly bursts into tears and starts hugging his mother's leg. Mother gives me an apologetic smile. I'm trying not to giggle as I walk on. Not a cop, but I saw someone about to go through a yellow, stop halfway, then literally back to the line. I'm not an officer, but one lovely summer day in downtown Seattle, my children and me were wandering around at Pike Place Market, riding the monorail, etc. They were roughly 4 and 5 at the time. A street artist had made my daughter a balloon crown with a big flower poking out the top. She was wearing it on her head when we passed by an alley and it blew off into the street. It exploded piece by piece, with each piece echoing down the street like a gunshot. 2 street officers and 2 mounted officers, on horses, were there in the blink of an eye. They saw the balloon parts, and realized what had happened. My daughter was crying. The officers were shaken but laughing. And this, being Seattle, Latte Land, prompted one officer to say that we owed them all a coffee. My daughter was sad to lose her hat, but the mounted officers let my children pet the horses, so everything worked out fine. In an opposite way, my dad once woke me up at like 10 PM for a surprise trip to a fast food place. It was a weird sort of tradition we had growing up. I told him I couldn't go because I was in pajamas and he said it was fine as long as no cops were there. Because, yeah no, it's illegal to wear pajamas in public and I would be arrested if caught. Of course. We show up and who is sitting in the back corner of the restaurant? That's right. 2 cops. My little 5-year-old self nearly lost it. My dad thought it was hilarious. I love the hurried reach for a seatbelt. Not a cop. But when I was much younger I was driving a 1994 Saturn SL1 that wasn't much of a car. No power, exhaust leaks, but it got me around. I pulled up next to a cruiser with a younger guy driving and decided that for some reason I wanted to see what he would do. As we waited at the light, I revved the engine multiple times. He looks over at me with his sunglasses on. No smile, just stared. I returned his look. When the light turned green I punched the gas, and the car promptly took off at its max speed of 2.5 miles per hour. I looked over and he was now laughing. Then he punched the gas and blew me away. I kind of hope I gave him a laugh in an otherwise boring dangerous day. Not a cop, but I ain't seen nothing. Someone ducking runs to hide behind a tree. A lot of people suddenly change their minds about what direction they're turning. Caught some drunk urinating in an alleyway in the town center. He saw me and scuttled away whilst still pissing, leaving a lovely wavy trail behind him. Not a cop, but when I was a kid my mom took me to an airport and there was an officer, curious little rascal at Iowa, and I saw his weapon holstered at his hip. Incidentally I was also at the right height. When my mom was occupied for a moment I left and went to the officer. I didn't even meant to be malicious, but he just happened to stand with his back at me and wasn't aware of me. That is until I grabbed his pistol and tried to get it out of the holster. I frequent a tavern in my city. A cop stops by every now and then for dinner to go and chills in his squad car for a couple minutes waiting for staff to walk the food out since he doesn't want to make patrons nervous. I was out smoking and there he is patiently waiting out back. Another patron walks out and stops dead in his tracks when he sees the idling cop car. He stares for a couple seconds, spins around and walks back inside. Had me dying for a minute. I had a friend who proceeded to do push-ups in the middle of the street. We probably looked like a bunch of kids just playing soccer, but then Big Brain decided to work out on the road. It was hilarious though because the cop was his uncle or something. One time we had a shirtless man enter the lobby of the jail yelling he was a D agent. We was demanding that we release 2 inmates to him, his girlfriend and friend. After he was in cuffs it turned out the 2 people he was after had already been released the day before. When we ran his name, he had a felony warrant for impersonating a peace officer, Not a cop, but a pretty funny thing happened when my husband and I took a road trip a few years ago. It was night. Getting close to our destination when we got pulled over. We weren't speeding or anything. Cop comes to the window. Hey, the light for your back license plate is out. Obviously we had no idea about this and equally confused why we got pulled over for this. Husband asks, really? Can I get out to check? Cop kinda stammers, oh okay. He gets out, goes to the back of the car and literally fonzes the plate, punched it, and the light turned back on. Cop laughs his ass off and tells him to get it checked out. We were on our way. No ticket. Waiting for the not me but a friend is a cop story. Not a cop, but I once saw a show where police were everywhere looking for a guy who'd run for it. Anyway, 2 cops are cruising down this street and as they pass this man they think he looks familiar, so start slowing down and called out to him. Instantly the guy bolted, so they chased him down and while they're arresting him he's screaming they've got the wrong man and he's allergic to handcuffs. Metal. Anyway, turns out he was the wrong guy and he was allergic to metal. He's just terrified of police, haha. True story by the way. I'm sure the cop following me enjoyed this. I was driving through small town Washington, which had a reputation for pulling over people for doing 1 mile per hour over. I saw the cop behind me, so I was checking my speed and ran a stop sign. Lights go on. My body turned to jello and I started melting to the floor. He started stopping but suddenly pulled away and followed 5 other cars that were ahead, lights and sirens blazing. If he saw the dead look on my face, I'm sure he would be laughing. Walked up on a woman shooting heroin into her leg. The look she gave me was kind of an owe it but calm about it. I just asked her to pack up her things and leave. I felt more sorry for her than anything and just tried to be nice, as I imagine most people aren't nice to her in the city I was working in. She showed me her university ID and it seemed that one thing led to another, and from being a university student to sitting on a sidewalk shooting heroin in the space of a year. I hope she's doing okay. This will probably get buried here, but whatevs. My dad and I are going home from somewhere when some idiot in front of us brakes really hard, forcing my dad do the same while both are on the second lane. Understandably, my dad honks him. After the roundabout, the dude pulls next to us. The duck did you honk me for? The duck did you brake like that for? Didn't you see the police car patrolling on the first lane? You cretin? So, go back in your mom's pussy. Eastern European insult. So, yeah. The nincompoop taught you couldn't pass a police car on patrol. Wonder if that made him case an accident yet. Hope not. My forklift isn't road legal. I saw my cousin drive out the shed down my private road to cross the main road to my pier, then I saw him turn around and quickly go back to the shed. Here's a funny car chase I found a while back. I was driving without a seatbelt. Came towards a robot and a metro police vehicle passed and the cop looked at me, oncoming lane, and I shyly put my seatbelt on. The driver next to me thought it was pretty funny because when I looked over he was pulling his seatbelt and laughing at me. Not an answer to the question, but a funny thing happened to me. I'd pulled a car over and while talking to him I noticed that he was high and the entire car reeked of marijuana. I asked him about it and he pretended to be offended. He had his phone in one of those holders on your windshield to display your GPS. All of a sudden he got a call from a contact called Coke Sitter name. There was a long pause and then he slipped out, not my phone. We took care of him. Yo, not a cop, but I have a story of getting away kinda. When I was a teenager I had my license at 16. My homeboy and his brother-in-law at the time got high as it. We smoked all the time and called me asking to take brother-in-law home. I had just got back from work and swapped into PJ pants. It's like 6 PM. Well, I take my homie and his bro to dude's house and he says I'll be like 10 minutes. Come back and get me. So we go like 3 blocks down the street to a ballpark parking lot to park and chill. We smoke a bowl and 5-0 comes down the driveway. Only one way out, so we had nowhere to go. My homie puts pipe between his feet and pulls out some smokes. I very rarely smoke, but to hide the smell, which I doubt worked, we both lit up. Cop rolls up behind. License and registration please. And I forgot my wallet in my work pants. Duck me right? Well, I give him names and numbers blah blah. He clears me as I blow sick smoke right into his face. Not even thinking. I look at him as soon as I did it, and he looked me dead in the eyes. I said sorry immediately, explained the situation. He asked me and my homie to get out of the car, made us swap seats because he had his ID, and made him drive home. Bro stayed at home, and me and homie left. No ticket, nothing, just told us to leave. Second luckiest I've ever been with the 5-0. Now I don't duck around and wait till I'm home lol. I think about that dude all the time. Glad he didn't duck me. With tickets I mean yeah, weirdos. I did a ride along with a buddy of mine at the time many years ago who works for CHP. He would just randomly flip you driving over the center divide and start tailing someone, and more often than not they would immediately start evading him. Was speeding, saw a cop pull out a few cars behind me and knew he was coming for me, so I pulled down a side road into a suburb. He turned down the same road, so I pulled into someone's driveway. No idea whose house it was. Seen the cop drive down the road really slow looking at my car, so I got out of the car and acted like I was going into the house, waved at the cop, and he kept on driving. Luckily no one was home, so I got back in my car, waited until the coast was clear and got TF out of there. My cousin was a cop. Told me one time he pulled this lady over that did not speak English very well. She handed over her info, looked at him and said, "I pooped." He wanted to just let her go, but he had someone else with him. So he just wrote the ticket as fast as possible and handed it over. Not a cop, but I was going 90 on a back road just trying to get home when suddenly a cop pulled up to a stoplight I was flying past. I had a joint in the car, so I started to pull over before he hit his lights and threw a pencil out the window to distract the cop. He found the pencil rather quickly and came over to ask me why I threw it. I had just gotten done eating the joint and I didn't have any water. So when I tried to speak I coughed and a puff of weed came out. He ran my it, gave me a ticket for going 15 over. He was being nice since I pulled over, and he gave me a summons for possession. I'm not the cop in this story, but it's funny nonetheless. My family and I were living in Las Vegas at the time, and my mom and dad were walking down the strip. My dad's jacking around like an idiot and runs in the middle of a group of cops. He looked around and wails, "Oh it's my worst nightmare," and ran away. Good times. Not a cop. As I merged onto the interstate one morning I noticed that there was only one other car sharing the road with me. I knew there was a spot about a mile away where local police sat in the median to watch for speeders. The car just ahead of me and one lane over had out of state plates. I decided to watch their brake lights to see if they tapped the brakes when they saw the police and to see how close they got before they noticed. We were not speeding at all. As we got pretty close I was impressed that they had resisted the urge to tap the brakes because I figured they had seen the patrol car by this time. About that time they must have spotted the officer because they just slammed on brakes and almost came to a complete stop in the center lane of the interstate. Good thing we were the only cars in sight. They got pulled over. Not my story. My uncles. Some dudes were pissing in a fountain, God knows why, and my dad who was on patrol duty that dad happened to see them. They ran away. I know, not weird yet, right? Well, thing is they didn't pull up their pants so they were running. Dongs out, pants at their ankles. But then they tripped and fell not far from the fountain. My uncle said he couldn't stop laughing. Really wish I could have seen. This may not fit but it is funny so I am going to add it. A kid that I went to school with had a family member that worked for the sheriff's department and I was at a church dinner when he told us this story. Whenever he was at the end of his shift he would tell people that if they could give a reason for committing the crime that he had never heard before he would let them go. He was avoiding work and he was like 50 so he had heard and seen everything. He had a few that were strange but the best one was a guy that was pulling a big trailer in the pouring rain going like 80 on some blacktop. He told the guy this and the guy said something like this, "I just wanted to see if you would get off your ass in the pouring rain to write me a ticket," and he told the guy, "You are free to go if you slow down to 65. The guy said yes sir and pulled away. Brought to you by Not a Cop. My dad used to be a cop. He told this story of he, in his patrol car, and a woman in a car beside him. 2-lane road, coming up to a traffic light and her looking at him and holding up a donut, and then rear-ending the stopped car in front of her. Not a cop but I worked at a Ford service center for a while and they would have us deliver and pick up cop cars from the station. One time I was driving a police Explorer and I pulled up to a light beside a guy who was on his phone. I kinda stared at him and soon as he noticed me he freaked out and dropped his phone. I just started laughing and drove off. Not a policeman but served a role in the department that included wearing police dress. On the way to a function, a friend and I were walking in our uniforms. Ahead of us there was a group of businessmen trying to jimmy their way into a car that they'd locked themselves out of. It was the middle of the CBD area and it was reasonably obvious that they weren't stealing it. But the best bit was them trying to act nonchalant when they saw us coming. Standing around looking innocent. Wearing full business suits. Clothes hangers unraveled in their hands. Absolutely nothing to see here, officer. The thing is, we had zero power in terms of law enforcement so it was honestly easier for us to pretend not to see them either. I love how people always slow down when they see a cop on the side of the road who already has someone pulled over.